She's, in the accelerated curriculum. If you'll notice here." The lieutenant flipped a command into his computer through the neural linkage, opening a window in the colonel's display to show him the girl's academic transcript. "She's already made the guaranteed cut for admission to Emperor's New College next year under ENC's Gifted Students program." Jesus. Magruder gazed at the transcript for a moment, then looked back at the psych profile. If she looks like this at 14... "That's why I felt she should be brought to your attention, sir," Maserati said. "I don't believe I've ever seen a stronger profile than this one, and as you say, she's only 14. "Too young," Magruder mused, and Maserati nodded. Scholastically, young DeVries was 4 standard years ahead of the vast majority of her age cohort. The test results had been forwarded to Colonel Magruder's office because the results of every fourth-form student whose profile cracked the filters were sent here. But Imperial law positively prohibited actively recruiting anyone, however high their test results, however severe the need, and even with parental consent, before he or she turned 18, among other things. "Besides," Magruder continued, "look at the genetic profile." He shook his head. "Couple the Uivari gene group with this academic profile, and she's never going to come our way anyhow. If she's already accepted for ENC, you know that's where she's going." He shook his head again, his expression sour. "It's too bad. We could really use her." "I agree, sir," the lieutenant said, "and I also agree that she's undoubtedly going to be under a lot of pressure to accept the ENC slot. But I think this may be one of the ones we want to flag to keep an eye on anyway, especially when you consider this." He sent another command over his headset, and his computer obediently opened yet another window. "You've already noticed the genetic profile, sir, but she gets that from her father's side of the family, and I thought you might find her maternal grandfather's resume interesting as well," he said blandly. "So I told the lieutenant it was a bad idea." Sebastian O'Shaughnessy chuckled and shook his head. "And she told me she was the platoon commander and I was only the company first sergeant. The way she saw it, that meant we'd do it her way. So we did." "And after you did?" his granddaughter asked with a huge grin, green eyes sparkling. "And after we did, and after the post-exercise critique, the lieutenant called me into her office and told me the captain had counseled her on the proper relationship between a brand-spanking new lieutenant fresh out of the academy on New Dublin and a company first sergeant with 19 standard years in the Corps." O'Shaughnessy smiled back at the girl. "I'll say this for her, she took it like a Marine, owned right up and admitted I'd been right without ever letting either one of us forget she was still the lieutenant and I was still the first sergeant. That's harder than it sounds, too, but she was a good one. Lieutenant Cho. Stubborn, like most of the good ones, but smart. Smart enough to recognize her mistakes and learn from them. Still, I don't know if she ever did figure out that the captain deliberately let her screw up the numbers just to make the point. But it's one a good officer never forgets, Allie. There's always someone who's been in longer or knows his job better, and the trick is to use that person's experience, especially if he's a long-service non-com who's been doing his job since about the time you were born, without ever surrendering your own authority or responsibility. That's why any good officer knows it's really the sergeants who run the Corps." His granddaughter looked at him for a moment, her eyes much more thoughtful, her 14-year-old face serious, then nodded. "I know how much I hate admitting it when I'm wrong," she said. "I bet it's a lot harder for an officer to admit that, especially if she's new and thinks looking weak will undermine her authority." "Exactly," Sebastian agreed. Then he glanced at his chrono. "And speaking of being wrong," he continued, "isn't there something else you're supposed to be doing right now instead of sitting here encouraging me to gas on?" The girl blinked at him, then looked at her own chrono, and sprang to her feet. "Oh my God."